My name is Claire Voss, and I am 41 years old. 3 weeks after my husband's funeral, his family gathered in a lawyer's office to hear a will that had been rewritten 9 days before he died. I sat in the second row in the same black dress I had worn to the burial, and I listened to them read my name out of a document that used to have it. What they did not know, what none of them knew, was that Daniel had told me what was coming 6 months before it happened. And the two of us had spent those 6 months making sure that when they finally made their move, there was nothing left to take. Before I tell you what happened in that office, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe. Drop your city and the time where you are in the comments. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to the spring. Daniel first got sick, and to a conversation we had on a Tuesday night in our kitchen that changed everything that came after. Daniel Voss was the kind of man who fixed things before they broke. He re-grouted the bathroom tile the year we bought the house because he said grout was the kind of problem that looked small until it wasn't. He rotated the tires on my car every 6 months without being asked. He kept a fireproof lockbox under the bed with copies of every document that mattered: birth certificates, insurance policies, the deed to the house. Organized in labeled folders he updated every January. He was an engineer by training and a planner by nature, and he loved me in the specific, practical way that planners love people. Quietly, thoroughly, and always 3 steps ahead. We had been married 14 years when he was diagnosed. Pancreatic cancer, stage 3. The oncologist used words like aggressive and timeline and quality of life, and Daniel sat across from her with a legal pad and wrote everything down. Not because he was in denial, because he was already making a list of what needed to be done. On the drive home, he didn't cry. He held my hand at every red light and said, "We have time, but we need to use it." I cried enough for both of us. He let me. Then he said, "Claire, I need you to listen to me about my family." I had been listening to Daniel talk about his family for 14 years. I knew the architecture of it by heart. His mother, Renata Voss, was 71 years old and had been the undisputed center of the Voss family's gravity since his father passed 11 years earlier. She was a small woman with excellent posture and the particular kind of warmth that came with conditions attached. She loved Daniel in the way some mothers love their sons, completely, and as an extension of herself. His success was her credit. His marriage was her concession. She had never fully accepted me. Not with cruelty, not with scenes, with a specific and practiced coolness, the kind that showed up in the seating arrangement at Christmas, in the way she asked about my work with a smile that landed 2 inches short of genuine, in 14 years of birthday cards signed, "Love, Renata, never Mom," even after I asked her once gently if she would mind. His brother Marcus was 4 years younger and had spent most of his adult life in the orbit of whatever Daniel was building. Marcus was charming the way certain people are charming, as a full-time occupation. He worked in real estate, moved between projects, borrowed money with the confidence of a man who had never been told no by anyone who loved him. Daniel had covered Marcus's debts twice that I knew about, possibly more that I didn't. His sister Petra lived 40 minutes away and functioned as Renata's deputy. She organized the family Christmases. She relayed information. She was the one who called Daniel when Renata was upset, and the one who called Renata when Daniel was, in her words, being difficult. In 14 years of marriage, I had never once had a real conversation with Petra Voss. Every exchange we had was a transaction moving information from one place to another with nothing personal attached. Daniel's father, before he died, had left behind a moderate estate, a house, some savings, a parcel of land outside the city that had been in the Voss family for 3 generations. In his will, he left everything to Renata with the understanding, stated in a letter if not in the legal document, that the assets would eventually be divided among the 3 children equally. In the 11 years since his father's death, Renata had quietly rewritten that understanding. Marcus had received 2 private loans that were never repaid and never formally forgiven, just absorbed. Petra had been given the family car, a portion of the savings to cover a renovation on her house, and what Daniel described as a constant low-level transfer of resources that never appeared on paper but added up over time. Daniel had received nothing, not because Renata didn't love him, but because Daniel didn't need it. He had a good income, a paid-off house, a stable marriage, a retirement account he had been building since he was 26. In the Voss family's unspoken economy, Daniel's stability made him ineligible for support and responsible for providing it. He had never complained about this, not once, not to me, not to anyone. He understood his family's logic even when he didn't agree with it. But lying in a hospital bed with a legal pad on his knees and a diagnosis that had just rearranged every timeline he had ever planned, Daniel Voss finally decided to say the quiet part out loud. "They will try to get the house, Claire." He said it on a Tuesday. Not as a fear, as a fact. His voice was steady, the same voice he used to read me the fine print on insurance documents. Marcus has been talking to Mom about it for years. He thinks if something happens to me before we have children, the family should get it back, as if what's mine is only mine until I stop needing it. I asked him what he wanted to do. He said, "I want to make sure that whatever I build, you keep, and I want to make sure there's nothing left for them to contest." Over the next 4 months, while Daniel underwent treatment and we rearranged our life around hospital schedules and medication timers and the particular exhaustion that comes from hoping very hard for a very long time, we also did something else. We spent 4 months making the house, the savings, the investments, and every asset we had together legally untouchable. Our attorney was a woman named Ruth Ellison. She was in her early 60s, small and precise, with a directness I appreciated more with every meeting. She had handled estate planning for 20 years, and she approached Daniel's situation the way Daniel would have approached it himself, methodically, without sentiment, with a clear understanding of exactly what the risks were and how to close each one. Ruth walked us through the options over 3 separate meetings at her office on Clement Street. She explained the difference between a will, which could be contested, and a trust, which was structurally harder to challenge. She explained how titling mattered, how beneficiary designations on retirement accounts and insurance policies passed outside of probate entirely, invisible to any will that might be rewritten or disputed. She explained what a pour-over will was and how it worked in combination with a revocable living trust. Daniel asked questions I would not have known to ask. He took notes the way he always took notes. Systematic, nothing skipped. On the way home after the 3rd meeting, he said, "I should have done this years ago." He didn't mean because he was sick. He meant because everyone should. By October, we had restructured everything. The house was transferred into a revocable living trust with both of our names as co-trustees and me as successor trustee. It would pass directly to me outside of probate. The retirement accounts had beneficiary designations updated and confirmed in writing. The life insurance policy named me as sole primary beneficiary with a nonprofit as secondary, not a family member. The investment account was retitled jointly with right of survivorship. Ruth drafted a new will that poured any remaining probate assets into the trust. Every document was signed, witnessed, notarized, and filed. When it was done, Daniel held the summary folder Ruth had prepared and said something I have thought about almost every day since. He said, "Now it doesn't matter what they do. You're already taken care of." He said it quietly, not with satisfaction, not with bitterness, with the specific relief of a man who has fixed the thing that needed fixing and can stop worrying about it. 3 weeks later, Renata called. I was in the kitchen when Daniel took the call. He sat at the table with his legal pad, which he still carried everywhere, even in treatment, and I could tell from the way his pen stopped moving that the conversation had shifted. He had given his mother the comfort of believing her version of the story, not because he owed her that comfort, but because he was a man who loved his family, even when he was protecting himself from them. That was the most Daniel Voss thing he had ever done. Daniel died on a February morning 14 months after his diagnosis. It was a Sunday. The light in the hospital room was the thin gray kind that comes before the sun decides what it's going to do. I was holding his hand. His breathing had been changing through the night, and around 6 a.m. it stopped. I sat with him for a while. Then I called Ruth. Then I called my sister. Then I called Renata. Renata arrived at the hospital 40 minutes later with Marcus and Petra. She walked into the corridor and held me for a long time without speaking. In that moment, she was simply a mother who had lost her son, and I was simply a wife who had lost her husband, and none of the rest of it existed yet. It existed by Thursday. Marcus called Thursday afternoon. His voice was careful, considerate, the voice of a man who has rehearsed his opening. He said he knew this was a difficult time, and he didn't want to add to my stress, but he wanted to make sure I had support navigating the estate process, because these things could get complicated, and he had some experience with property transactions, and he just wanted to help. I thanked him. I told him Ruth was handling everything. He said, of course, but just so I knew he was available. He said it the way people say they're available when they mean they're watching. The funeral was on a Wednesday. Gray sky, cold for February, even by our city's standards. Daniel had left instructions. He wanted a small service, specific music, no receiving line. His friends from the engineering firm came. Our neighbors. A few cousins I had met at holidays over the years. Ruth attended. She stood near the back and left without speaking to anyone from the Voss family, which I understood and appreciated. Marcus spent most of the reception standing near Daniel's desk in the study. He opened 2 drawers. I watched him from across the room and said nothing. Petra handled the catering with the same efficient joylessness she brought to every family logistics task. She told me 3 times that if I needed anything, I should call, with the particular energy of someone establishing a record of having offered, rather than genuinely expecting to be taken up on it. Renata sat in Daniel's chair for most of the afternoon, his reading chair by the window. She held a photo of him from when he was maybe 10 years old, and she stroked the frame slowly, and I watched her grieve with a rawness that had nothing performed in it, and I felt the full weight of the fact that we were both losing the same person in completely different ways. That night, alone in the house, I sat on the kitchen floor for a long time. not because I couldn't stand up, because the kitchen floor was where Daniel and I had sat the night he came home from his first treatment, too tired to make it to the couch, and he had held my hand and said, "We're going to be okay." And I had not believed him, and he had been right and wrong at the same time. I let myself have that night, the whole of it. Then in the morning, I called Ruth. The formal reading of the will was scheduled for 2 weeks after the funeral. Ruth had already informed the family through proper channels. What none of them knew, because Ruth had not volunteered it and I had not mentioned it, was that the will reading was largely ceremonial. The substantive assets had already transferred. The trust had already activated. The beneficiary designations had already processed. By the time the family sat down in Ruth's office, the estate was, for all practical purposes, settled. I found out about the other will 4 days before the reading. Ruth called me on a Thursday morning. Her voice was the same as always, measured, but something underneath it was tighter than usual. She told me that an attorney named Gerald Fitch had contacted her office. Gerald Fitch represented Renata Voss. He was presenting a document he described as Daniel's final will and testament, executed 9 days before Daniel's death, superseding all prior documents. I sat down. Ruth continued. She had reviewed the filing. The document named Renata as primary beneficiary of Daniel's estate. It left me a sum of $50,000, described in the document as a loving gift in recognition of our years together. The house, the investments, the remainder of the savings, all of it directed to a Voss family trust to be administered by Marcus. I asked Ruth if it was valid. She said, "On its face, it appears properly executed. Signed, witnessed, notarized. But Claire, there are problems." She walked me through them. Daniel had been in inpatient care during the 9 days in question. His medical records from that period documented significant cognitive effects from the pain management protocol he was on, effects that his oncologist had noted in writing. The standard for testamentary capacity required that the person signing a will understand the nature of the document, the extent of their assets, and the natural objects of their bounty, meaning the people who would reasonably expect to benefit. Ruth believed the capacity question alone was significant. There was also the question of undue influence. Daniel had not contacted Gerald Fitch himself. Gerald Fitch was Renata's attorney of 20 years. The nursing notes from Daniel's final week showed that Renata and Marcus had visited 4 times in the 9 days preceding the new document. Ruth had already requested the visitor logs. And then there was the practical reality, which Ruth explained with the particular precision of someone who had been waiting to say it. The new will was almost entirely irrelevant. The house was in the trust. The trust had transferred at the moment of Daniel's death according to its terms. The retirement accounts had transferred by beneficiary designation. The life insurance had transferred by beneficiary designation. The investment account had transferred by right of survivorship. The only assets the new will could reach were the limited probate assets, a small checking account, a car, some personal property. The $50,000 the new document offered me as a loving gift was, ironically, more than the total value of what they could actually claim under it. I sat on the phone with Ruth for 40 minutes. When we hung up, I went to the kitchen and made coffee. I didn't drink and stood at the window looking at the backyard where Daniel had built the raised beds for the tomatoes 3 summers ago. He had known. He had known this was coming, or something like it, and he had built the shelter before the storm arrived. Every trust document, every beneficiary designation, every retitling, every notarized signature on every labeled folder in the fireproof box under our bed. It was all the same impulse as the grout he fixed before it cracked and the tires he rotated before they wore, and the fireproof box itself, acquired years before there was anything alarming to put in it. He had been taking care of me since before I knew I needed it. I want to be honest with you here. The 4 days between Ruth's call and the will reading were some of the hardest of my life. Not because I was afraid of losing the house. I knew the house was protected. What I felt was something uglier and more complicated than fear. It was grief contaminated by betrayal. I was trying to mourn my husband in a house that his family was simultaneously attempting to take. I was trying to remember the man who had sat with me on this kitchen floor and told me I was going to be okay, while also accepting that the people he came from had sat with him in a hospital room in his final 9 days and guided his hand toward a document that would have taken it all from me. I don't know exactly what happened in those 9 days. I wasn't there for every hour. I know what the visitor log showed. I know what the nursing notes documented about his condition. I know that Daniel loved his mother, even as he protected himself from her, and I will never fully know how much of what happened in that room was coercion, and how much was a dying man trying to give his family something and not fully understanding what he was signing. What I know is what he had already told me months earlier, in full capacity, on a Tuesday in our kitchen with a legal pad and a pen and the clearest eyes I have ever seen on anyone facing what he was facing. He said, "I want to make sure that whatever I build, you keep." He said it, and then he spent months making sure it was true. I went to the reading. I arrived at Ruth's office at the same time she had scheduled all parties. Renata was already there, seated in one of the chairs along the wall. She was wearing the same black coat she had worn to the funeral. Petra sat beside her. Marcus was standing near the window with his phone, checking it with the contained impatience of a man who believes the meeting is going to go the way he has planned it. Gerald Fitch was there as well, a heavy man in his 60s with a gray suit and the particular confidence of an attorney who has done something he knows is technically aggressive, but believes is defensible. He had a folder on the table in front of him. Ruth stood at the head of the table. She looked at me once, a brief, direct glance that communicated everything without communicating anything. Then she called the meeting to order. She began with Daniel's trust. She explained its structure, its terms, its execution date. She named the assets it held. She explained that these assets had transferred according to the trust's terms at the moment of Daniel's death and were no longer part of the probate estate. Marcus's hand stopped moving over his phone. Ruth named the retirement accounts, the life insurance policy, the investment account. She explained how beneficiary designations and joint titling worked outside of probate. She explained what remained in the probate estate. She placed a number on the table. It was not a large number. Renata looked at Gerald Fitch. Gerald Fitch opened his folder and placed the new will on the table with the careful deliberateness of a man playing what he believes is a strong card. He identified himself, identified his client, identified the document, and stated that it superseded all prior testamentary instruments. Ruth let him finish. Then she placed her own folder on the table. She explained the capacity concerns. She named the medical records. She referenced the nursing notes. She stated the dates of the family's visits in Daniel's final 9 days. She explained what undue influence was and what the standard for demonstrating it required. She explained that she had already retained a forensic every document signed and witnessed and filed. What he wanted is already done. The room was quiet. Marcus looked at Gerald Fitch. Gerald Fitch was looking at his folder in the way lawyers look at folders when they are calculating whether the next move is worth the fee. Renata spoke for the first time. Her voice was quieter than I expected. She said, "He was my son." I said, "I know." She said, "He should have thought about his family." I said, "He did." Another silence, the kind that has weight. Ruth asked Gerald Fitch if he intended to file a challenge. Gerald Fitch said he would need to consult with his client. Ruth said she would expect to hear from him within 10 days. She provided her card. She closed her folder. The meeting was over in 40 minutes. Renata stood slowly, the way she had stood slowly at the funeral, with the effort of a woman carrying more than her body accounted for. She looked at me once more before she left. It was not a look I had seen from her before. It was not anger. It was not the careful coolness of 14 years of polite distance. It was something rawer and harder to name. I think it was the look of a woman who had just understood, fully and finally, what her son had decided about her. Petra followed her out without speaking. Marcus paused in the doorway. He looked at me with the expression of a man trying to decide whether to say something that won't help. He decided not to. He left. Gerald Fitch gathered his folder and nodded at Ruth with the professional courtesy of opposing counsel, and walked out. Ruth and I sat alone in the conference room. She said, "They won't file. The cost of litigation against a properly structured trust with documented capacity concerns and a forensic examiner already retained is not a fight Gerald Fitch is going to take on contingency for a probate estate worth what that one is worth." I nodded. She was right. Gerald Fitch sent a letter 8 days later declining to pursue the matter. It was 2 paragraphs and said nothing that mattered. The weeks that followed had a particular texture I am still not sure how to describe. Grief is strange enough on its own. Grief after a fight you have already won is stranger. The threat had collapsed. The house was mine. The accounts were mine. The life Daniel had built with me was intact in every practical sense. And I was still waking up at 3 a.m., reaching for the other side of the bed and finding it empty. My neighbor Helen, who had known Daniel since we moved in, brought me soup 3 times. She didn't ask about the family or the estate or any of it. She just brought soup and sat at the kitchen table and talked about her garden and let me not talk about anything. Ruth called once a week for the first month. Professional updates, but she always stayed on the phone a few minutes past the business. I appreciated it more than I told her. Renata did not call. Neither did Petra or Marcus. The silence from the Voss family was total, and I recognized it as the most honest thing they had communicated in years. They were not estranged from grief. They were estranged from me specifically. Daniel had been the bridge. Without him, there was nothing left to connect us. The warmth that had sometimes appeared at family gatherings, the brief moments when Renata laughed at something I said and seemed, for a moment, to actually see me. All of it had been on loan. It belonged to Daniel. He had taken it with him. I sat with that for a long time. It hurt in the specific way that the loss of something you never quite had hurts, not a sharp pain, a dull, diffuse ache that you notice most when the room is quiet. 4 months after the reading, Marcus called. I almost didn't pick up. I let it go to voicemail. His message was short. He said he had been thinking. He said he knew things had gone badly. He said he missed his brother. He said he was sorry for how everything happened, and he would understand if I didn't want to talk, but he just wanted me to know. I listened to the message 3 times. Then I called him back. I want to be careful about how I tell this part, because it is the part I am least certain about. I do not know what Marcus intended when he called. I do not know if the apology was genuine or strategic or some mixture of both that even he couldn't fully separate. What I know is that he answered on the second ring, and his voice was different from the voice in Ruth's office. Quieter, less produced. He said he had spent the months since the reading thinking about what his mother had asked him to help with. He said he had told himself it was just protecting the family, but he had known, somewhere underneath that story, that it was wrong. He said Daniel would have been ashamed of him. I said, I know. He said he was sorry. Not a performed apology, a short, plain sentence. I'm sorry, Claire. I should have stopped it. I didn't tell him I forgave him. I didn't tell him I didn't. I told him that Daniel loved him. That was true. And that Daniel had understood who his family was and loved them anyway. That was also true. And that the protections he had built were not about punishing any of them, but about making sure that what he wanted for me actually happened, regardless of what anyone else wanted. That was truest of all. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, He always thought ahead. He always did, I said. We talked for 40 minutes. Not about the estate, not about Gerald Fitch, not about any of it. About Daniel. About a camping trip they had taken when Marcus was 16, and Daniel was 20, and Marcus had gotten his foot stuck in a creek, and Daniel had laughed so hard he couldn't help until he stopped laughing. About the way Daniel made coffee, always too strong, always in the same chipped blue mug. About the way he carried a legal pad everywhere like other people carry phones. About the way he fixed things before they broke. I have not spoken to Renata or Petra since the reading. I don't know if I will. That door is not closed, but it is not open either. It exists somewhere in the particular territory of things that are unresolved, because the person who would have resolved them is no longer here. What I know is this. I live in the house Daniel and I chose together. I sit in the raised bed garden he built, and I grow the tomatoes he would have eaten, and I drink coffee in the kitchen where we sat on the floor the night he came home from his first treatment. His chipped blue mug is still in the cabinet. I have not been able to move it, and I don't try anymore. The fireproof lockbox is still under the bed. I checked it last January, the way he always checked it, going through each folder to make sure everything was current. His handwriting is on all the labels. I did not change them. I think about what he said, that patience isn't weakness, that fixing things before they break is just good planning, that taking care of the people you love sometimes means doing the work quietly, years in advance, with a legal pad and an attorney and a box of labeled folders under the bed. He could not stop his family from being who they were. He could not make his mother trust me, or his brother stop calculating, or the years of small losses mean something different than they meant. He could not fix any of that, but he could make sure I had ground to stand on. He did. If someone you loved left something behind to protect you, something they built quietly before you knew you needed it, I want to hear about it in the comments. Tell me what they left you. And if this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. If you haven't subscribed yet, I would love to have you here for the next one.